definitely crafted. Eskew, who describes himself, and I love this, as a tenured black dude in America and a professional comic book store worker, takes readers, or as he calls them, true believers, on a journey wherein we have these what seemingly desperate literary lines of inquiry, these paths and they're crossing each other. So we have within this text, and these narratives are just wonderfully blended. African American literature. We also have comic book superhero lore. We have Namibian satire, and we also have memoir writing. So everybody, let's welcome back Charlie J.
I was coming up with something to say more like profound and kind about Otterbein that I didn't meet earlier when I was walking to Dr. Bird's class, and I hear two students, one of which says, Otterbein's the shit. And I'm like, yeah, I'll just use that. So Otterbein is the shit. And thank you for having me in the shit. Yeah, so I wrote a book, Tales of the Astonishing Black Spark. It is a satire, as Dr. Bird was explaining, about an African-American superhero that comes from Ohio. It's a comic book geek, and it was probably the hardest experience to capture that I could ever imagine. But somehow I was able to relate to Donald. I was able to understand what it's like to be a black man faced with a number of different issues pertaining to his identity, where to fit in exactly, what exactly it means to be black for the black community, what it means to be black for a less marginalized community, what it means to be black for yourself, and just what it means to be a human with a moniker that is unfortunately labeled as the other. So with that being said, I guess I wanted to discuss a few things, but also a reading as well. So I wanted to read from a few different passages, if that's okay. And I'm asking like this is a reading.
No.
Like no. So this is my tattered copy. So I actually brought a better one because it has pages falling out. It's a good quality book though. I kind of beat my list to death. So with the discussion of it being a satire, I wanted to read from a few passages that kind of bring to light the absurdity in certain things, which is the point of satire. And some are funny, and then some aren't as laughy, but I wanted to kind of encapsulate that feel of what I was trying to do with this novel. So for a little backstory, to bring us up to speed with the first item I'm going to read, basically our protagonist, Donald, the Black Spark, who doesn't have this name as of yet, he is just finding out that he has powers. He got struck by lightning, sucked, and he was in the hospital for a while. But he is driving home from work after a shift where he suddenly notices that batteries are kind of operating differently when he touches them as he works at the stereo hut, which had nothing to do with me working at Radio Shack. Yeah, so I'll just dive right into that one. After work, I climbed into my Corsica to enjoy what little night I had before starting over from the top. No matter their creed, color, or comic book origin, anyone can feel the power behind the wheel. Bonus points for stick shift, of course. I love clouding my mind with gears and glinting moonlight. These moments have been hijacked as of late by Thandie D. Neville. I found that all she had to do was infect a moment in time, and that was that. She was wedged there like a granule of sea salt that wouldn't melt. If you decided to pick up this book, Paul, I know you're probably saying, bro, get over it. And don't worry, only 9, at most 10% of this book is about her, I promise. I slowed down at the red light and fumbled through a tangle of headphones and power cords wedged in my coin tray to find the half-full box of menthol maniums. My smoking habit could play as a metaphor for any black power movement after the 80s, not fully committed and reluctantly active. Less than a mile from my shoebox, I considered driving all night, blowing puffs of death stream into the familiar night. But the oasis of chill I found myself in thinned as quickly as the dissipating smoke when flashes of red and blue summoned to stop from behind. These are the astonishing tales of first times. Every nigga has a cop story. This will, unfortunately, always be our great unifier. It's one of those things we promise to teach you later. It's become so redundant that a guy, no matter how kind of sort of brown he is, getting pulled over is equivalent to a fart joke in your favorite Adam Sandler movie. I digress and apologize, as I'm aware that 2 more racially aimed comments will officially land this little memoir in the dusty African-American section of your local bookstore. These are the astonishing revolutions that cannot be categorized. The sirens are the worst part, always. They rattle my skin like it's covered by a Marvel symbiote. At the sound, I drop my cigarette and then curse while swatting at my fiery crotch and simultaneously pulling over. Amid this reckless flailing, I tapped the gas pedal over and over and heard the stutters of the police officer's car whoop-whooping. When we finally parked, he waddled up to my window and acknowledged with a grunt what a burden I'd been. I'm tired too, I wanted to tell him. I'm so tired. I'm not a moron though, so I bit the words back. Do you know why I pulled you over? These are the astonishing tales of because I'm young and I'm black and my hat's real low? I didn't let my Jay-Z-inspired insolence escape. I avoid eye contact. No, sir. You don't? I know that your registration stickers are on the wrong side of your plate. I know that you should take the bass out of your voice when you're speaking to a police officer. There was no bass, no treble, just a scared, soon-to-be superhero staring at his own waist, wondering if he'd be the next name on a picket sign under things that mattered. He rolled his eyes, and I ducked mine low. The inevitable dip in our dance. I almost went for my ID, but thought better of it. I sat. I waited. Your ID, sir. I complied. When I reached into my side pocket, there was a reassuring lack of pals. I was free to start feeling the fire. Don't you hear my voice? Don't you know that I'm one of the goddamn smart ones? He didn't. The sound of braking behind my ears began then, and I don't know if it's ever stopped. Please step out of the vehicle, sir. I climbed out. I didn't ask why, because, well, not a moron. Where are you from? I'm sorry. Where are you coming from? Work? His eyebrow was raised at that. Where's that exactly? The stereotype. Mind if I search your car, sir? It's not a secret, or at least it shouldn't be, that you have every right to say no to a question like this. You can also raise a middle finger. You can laugh in their faces. You can beg them not to make you part of the hashtag hailstorm. There's a lot of things you can do. Sure, I answered. The officer tore through my vehicle like a beast from the east or some other juvenile thing. He found nothing but seemed so pleasantly exhausted afterward that I considered bumming him a cigarette. I stared around my car at the accumulating mess, the cost of a disorganized life. Amongst the amalgam, I saw old printouts of weekly work schedules and comic books I hadn't gotten around to reading yet, still bound in the plastic they were shipped in. Passers-by, few that they were, stared for a moment before blazing off. Shitty as it was, this was the good part. For a moment, I became the badass, the one I ran from through the halls of my high school. The onlookers gave me that gift, turned me, with one magical glance, into that darkness. I was brought back to life, back to reality, by the sound of a clinking coin. During the ransack, it had glanced off the accumulating pile of crap at an odd angle. It wasn't a coin for spending, just for keeping. It signified 5 years of my father's sobriety from narcotics. When I was 14, I found it on top of his dresser while pilfering change to avoid the embarrassment of having to use a free lunch ticket. I found it at a time when I thought any Roman numeral was fancying to be admired. I wasn't much for photos or movie stubs, but that coin, that goddamn origin-starting coin. It dropped out of the open door and started to roll away into the darkness. I wanted to ask permission to run after it. I couldn't, though. I was powerless. These are the astonishing tales of fuck that. I reached out a hand like the 5-year-old you once were, the one who saw Empire Strikes Back one too many times and tried to use a force she didn't have. I don't know the why of the next bit, just the how. Twinkles of blue sparks danced from my fingertips to the coin as it shot up to my hand. Before the officer had time to turn, I was already holding it. Oh, fuck, I yelled. The officer turned with a hand over his firearm. I was too connected to care. Yeah, that was how it started. So that's that is the what I kind of drew from when I was writing that scene was actually an experience that I had myself, where I was actually traveling to North Carolina to see some family, and my girlfriend at the time was with me and my older brother and my niece, his daughter, who was still like in a car seat at that point. When we get pulled over, the officer kind of comes up to our door, does the knock, the standard like cliche cop moment from like your favorite special episode about a black person ever, and he has us like he sort of these questions at us like, hey, like where are you guys going? What's going on? I was speeding, so I deserved to get pulled over. Not saying anything there, but when he approached, he had me come out of the car and he put me in his. I was actually a student here at the time, and while he had me sitting in the car, for reasons I still don't understand, he proceeded to kind of grill me as to the answers I'd already given him. In one of the moments, because I went here, as I mentioned earlier, I discussed my financial woes and the issues of paying a speeding ticket, and if it's possible to pay it in installments, because Otterbein, But the officer, he was surprised, and he just looks at me, he's like, oh, you're one of the smart ones then, huh? And I just had this moment of like, oh, wow, that happened. That was from a scene in a movie, not real life, except it was real life, and yeah, that hit me. So I, do what I hope like any writer tries to do and incorporate that into my work, because I feel like those experiences, when you're also alone and no confirmation, which unfortunately is a big deal for some people, save for the words that come out your mouth, there's something to be found in that anecdotal explanation of what it's like to be in that moment and to be pulled over. So that's kind of what I was trying to capture there with his first moment of having tangible power, but being powerless at the same time, which, yeah, hopefully it resonated throughout the entirety of the book. But yeah. Regarding the book, has anybody, just to gauge the reader, like who has read the novel, just so I know what I can. Okay, awesome. Okay, and totally awesome if you haven't either. But just want to know what I should say or not.
But read it though. Ruin the end.
Right? Yeah. Oh gosh. He finds out that. So, speaking about the satire, I kind of wanted to talk about some of my inspirations for Spark. That a lot of my friends try to, assume that it's all about me, which not necessarily true. It has moments that I pull from to kind of give more realism to by incorporating things that I've actually gone through. But I also try to pull from a number of different works or themes and ideas. And also, one of the big points of it is this idea of the language that's used in media and news reporting, as far as like the experiences that I think separate us from seeing marginalized groups as human, unfortunately. And when it came to that, I pulled a lot from different things that had occurred. For instance, the supervillains in the book are called super predators, as a play on the origin of that word, which was most recently notable for in the 90s when Hillary Clinton discussed the epidemic of super predators, and then it was a weird time because Trump was on the same idea wavelength with the Central Park 5, and it was just weird. But yeah, so I tried to pull from that when naming the villains, because not all of them are necessarily villains, but the words that we place on them define them for us without us knowing anything about them. And I find that as a common theme that isn't often discussed in superhero narratives, but I figured it fit well with the satire of the African American experience there. Also, one of the big prevailing ideas is the talented 10, the idea that was coined by W.E. Burghardt, I actually found out recently. That's nothing to do with anything, but I totally went to a bookstore. They had a first edition where they used the B, and I was like, oh wow, I could have Wikipedia'd this, but it was so blank. But anyway, the talented 10th is the idea of the Negro race, like all races, is going to be saved by its exceptional men. Negroes must first deal with the talented 10th and develop the best of their race. And that question kind of hangs over the entire book, I feel, because it's this idea of you're told that you're one of the good ones, one of the better ones, one of the smarter ones, but all that really does is separate you from a community that's already marginalized. So I wanted to put that on a black superhero because as a comic book geek, in my history with black superheroes, you have generally like maybe 1 to 2 archetypes that really kind of come out. One of them I talked about earlier with Dr. Burns' African American satire course, in relatively recent, is Luke Cage. The TV show specifically is why I say recent. But there's this moment that I was watching it. Of course, I can't claim this is why, but it was after I finished the book. But there's this moment I'm watching it, and Luke Cage is sitting there in his hoodie and just like staring at this building that like he has to go in and fight the bad guys. And this young black man comes up to him, and he's just like, "Yo, nigga, I need you to go away." And Luke just gets this dour, depraved face, and he turns to the guy. He's like, "You call me nigga here? Do you know what this park is? Do you know the meaning of where we're at? You do not." And it's like this very finger waggy, like Obama's first presidential run where he had to kind of distance himself from certain individuals, and he utilized kind of this I can say they're bad too, and it kind of helped that idea of separating him from a group that he ultimately was a part of. Luke Cage, that is, and Obama during that time when he was first running. But I noticed that kind of come up a number of different times, so I wanted to play with that and kind of go away from the hyper-masculine idea of black superheroes and kind of dive more into what would those things present as far as flaws for someone who is never treated as quote-unquote better or quote-unquote different and has, quite honestly, the most stereotypical power a black man can have as a superhero, which is electricity. And just kind of all of those things that add up to him and his experience. But yeah, so I guess I wanted to move on to another section before I continue rambling. While I am pulling it up, I will say once more thank you to Otterbein for having me. And thank you more so for putting it as far away from the financial department as you can.
They're going to come get you, huh?
Right? So this next bit I'm going to read is from a chapter following a superhero battle, as there has to be in a superhero book. But the area that what happens is Donald is running to join the American community rebuking ominous, nihilistic, yapping marauders. We changed the name once or twice, so I might be a bit off on my own story there. But which is basically the Avengers of this universe. Ultimately, he thinks he did a good job at subduing the villains and throwing out a catchphrase and saving the day. And yeah, but fortunately, his agent, Christopher Rowe, which his name is tied to Jim Crow, he doesn't feel that Donald has done as well as Donald does. And this chapter is called something that I'm using to buy time on. Go to the page. Okay, Election Day. That's the name of the chapter. Okay. You're fucking with me, right? Did you see me out there? Wait, okay. Just rewind it, like 20 seconds. Okay, stop. See? There? See what I did? That was fucking astonishing, Chris. Chris and I sat on the same side of his desk for once, watching a YouTube video of my team up with Dahl. I had time to rewind to the moment I took down Brickbox. I looked crisp and elegant, like I knew what the hell I was doing. Chris didn't seem to disagree. He'd smirked at all the right moments, but then he told me that my loss was nigh, and if I could find a way out of my lease in the Bronx shoebox and enough dollars for a flight home, it'd be best to cash out. It was good, kid. It was damn good. But I'm doubting it was enough. He closed out of the YouTube window and opened 10 or so more tabs. Give these a read, and then talk about how you're winning. Where are you going? I said. Taking a shit. This will take you a while. I flicked the first tab. The site was familiar, a far-right American news, opinion, and commentary website that had gotten some traction lately. Regardless of who or what they set in their crosshairs. Insane as they were, people read them. People had the votes to send my black ass home. Sparky the stoner? Look, in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane, it's a superhero who loves to get extremely high. While subduing the notorious super predators, Brickbox and Dr. Detestable, the Black Spark decided to proclaim his love of drug abuse. In the heat of the moment, this potential member of America's premier superhero team cried out, "Let's spark it up." Our resident expert on slang terminology, Tyrone Johnson, has confirmed that this is code for, "Hello, my friend, let us smoke the marijuana." The Black Spark is perhaps best known for apprehending the moderately threatening maverick moralist who has not been proven to be associated with any religious organization or political party. His behavior was completely unprofessional. I couldn't really see his eyes from where I was, but I can't say I'd be surprised if they were bloodshot, one witness informed us. The Black Spark's agent, Christopher Rowe, was not available for comment. "You seem pretty available for comment now, Chris," I screamed from the bathroom. Chris, whom I must praise for at least his impeccable timing, volleyed without words and let the thunderous sound of his toot speak for him. I pressed on. A spark of abuse. Women speak out against Black Spark. The Spark, until recently a frontrunner for election to the American Collective for resolving overtly negative Yale misconducts, is already making headlines. Unfortunately, they're less than heroic. Sources report that the Spark struck the female super predator, Dr. Detestable, with excessive force, revealing a troubling inability to contain his animalistic rage. How long will we let the specter of toxic patriarchy loom over us under the pretense of superheroics? We here at Agatha's Wolf Fight are petitioning for Spark's immediate expulsion from the election. Also, there were other women there too. "But what the shit was I supposed to do, huh?" I yelled to Chris. "Oh, I don't know. Not punch a white woman square in the jaw on live TV? I mean, that could have been one thing, but the hell do I know?" He yelled back. And at least he was giving me words again. A spark into fury, deconstructing the rage of black superheroes. "Nope. Read it, McDougal." "Nah, I'm out of here. I'll see you later." That I was parroting some article that I read and using hyperbole a lot, but trying to paint that image when it comes to the first article in his drug use that is alluded to based on a catchphrase that he had said. Which, funny side anecdote, when I first came up with that, I can't say I came up with Spark It Up, but I was actually out writing at Java Central. I was working on the project, and I was just like, really feeling myself, like, I'm writing, I'm doing the writing thing. And I was like, let me put this into my Facebook, and I'm like, just sparking it up at Java Central. And so many likes, and I'm like, I had told 3 people about this project. It's gonna be big. Well, spark it up, hashtag spark it up. I'm not old, but yeah. So finding that out later from a friend informed me that this would be a perfect moment to include, not knowing what it was originally, but just that assumption of what I had to have been referring to. But yeah, so that was that one. And then the Agatha's wolf fight was less about like jabbing at the idea of like patriarchy or anything like that, but it was more so discussing, because to add context, that when it says in that moment there was another woman there too, he's referring to an Asian American woman who they just completely forget to mention, because it's discussing that idea of issues of not focusing on intersectional feminism versus a predominantly white-focused one. And then lastly, the deconstructing the rage of black superheroes I just thought was fun, but I couldn't even write that because it was like, okay, this is going to be too ridiculous. But yeah, and also comedy roll freeze. So yeah. But yeah, so talking about those, another thing that drew me to the project was the fun I can have with using actual media and things of that nature to paint this picture, because for me, and I think for anyone that does satire, like it's the fun of it, it comes from discussing these things that actually happen, not necessarily with humor, but with absurdity and kind of highlighting that. So when I was working on it, I had a lot of research that I ended up having to do that I wasn't expecting, because I figured, oh, I'll just write about being a nerd all along. But no, there was a lot of things that I had to dive into. For instance, in one of the chapters following, which I named All That and Rabbit Stew, which is named after a infamous cartoon, Bugs Bunny, and a plucky black individual with a gun that just can't seem to get bugs, but it's full of like racist stereotypes and caricatures of a young black man. I, in that chapter, discuss other advertisements and things like that that were used in a very illogical way. As it's probably evident by saying that, it's satire is also a good way to kind of express your dissatisfaction with certain things in our community. So yeah, that was one of the main things I wanted to cover. Is, for instance, there's a moment where they do a Spark video game where he's put in a Club and Spark outfit. So in the Resident Evil franchise, there is, which I wish I had my pictures available, but there was a new character because it took place in African zombies. But it was Club and Sheva, and Sheva was your like side character, your like buddy character, and she had just as much importance as the white male protagonist. But they decided to add a DLC, which is downloadable content, and call it the Club and Sheva outfit. And basically, it was Sheva, who is this like very pragmatic, like skilled, like fighter, and not at all like how they painted her by doing this. But so I wanted to highlight that, which is why I did the same thing to Spark in the book, and a number of other ones, like with a show Afro Samurai. There was unfortunately an ad ran in the video game for the series, in which they decided to add a $3 off Church's Chicken coupon inside of it. So I decided to incorporate that because side by side they begin to seem absurd, but I felt that the importance is truth and honesty in what has happened. Because even though the quantity and the span of time is different, it still happened, and it's fun to hear people that I've talked to who've run it are like, oh, where'd you come up with this? This is kind of silly. It's like, well, I didn't come up with it. I just kind of wrote it. Yeah. Well, I get what time?
We're good on time. What time?
Yes.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So to kind of questions or anything. There is one other here. So this one is less super heroic. It is basically about kind of what I thought was at the heart of like Donald and his quote unquote mission. With great power comes great responsibility. This is a chapter where he's kind of going over his daddy issues, and he is talking in a backflash about this part, unfortunately, is very true. He strapped a number of different rockets to the, like firecrackers to the bottom of the skateboard with his friend, thinking that it would turn it into a rocket skateboard. I have to just own that one. But yeah, so Donald returns to school, everybody has all these rumors, but he ends up getting into a little trouble. And I guess that's enough to kind of give a painting. Donald, said my father's tobacco-shredded voice. His hand tightened over my own, but I still didn't open my eyes. I thought I knew I was conscious. I'm sorry. I thought I was under the falling sky of my dreams, but he knew different. He knew I was conscious. Donald, please, just say something. He was a strong man, true believer, because he knew when to be weak. I'm not angry, just wake up, please. He was a strong man, true believer, because he always believed in the possibility that we can wake up. Dad, I finally managed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I let the light of the living world into my eyes. I turned to him, saw the brown dreadlocks falling across his face, hanging just above his navel. He got up from the hospital recliner next to my bed and leaned over, kissing my forehead, graciously giving me his tears, the privilege of being present for the third time he cried in his entire life, in the last. I closed my eyes again, finding back my own tears, because the hardest thing to do in this life is give back. He laughed like he taught me to do when I was angry, hide behind a smile, and the world won't know it's ever won over you. I knew that he was angry with me, though, because you can't hide anything from someone who's part of you. Not really, anyway. I felt the top of my head, happy to find I still had hands, but I frowned when I realized my treasured kufi was gone. Where's my hat? I asked. My father's cold laughter melted into authenticity. Before I could question him any further, Kat burst through the door, her father hanging behind her, unimpressed with my continued existence. She threw herself over me. I hate you, she cried. While her weeping and her wobbly arms said the opposite, I started to cry. We shared a moment forged from all the melodramatic scenes of special episodes aimed at our generation. Later there'd be a glorious buckle, and video games after. There was a grounding that included washing each wall of the house with a toothbrush while a Sade tape played on boombox in the background. There was a fire I'd earned and a chill I hadn't. I missed an entire week of school. When I returned, I was impressed by the lore everyone had made up in my absence. Apparently, I had tried to run away with Kat to Cincinnati, or I'd blown half my body off and had it replaced with cybernetic enhancements. I let those rumors compound themselves, partially because they were entertaining, but also because I knew the only voices most of them cared to hear were their own. This wasn't the case with my star boy, Paul Hughes. Paul wasn't always the beacon of black consciousness that he'd become for the better part of my life. That didn't happen until his teenage years, where he tripped and fell into a box of Dead Prez songs. Before that, he was a plague of such indiscretions as stealing chocolate milk from unsuspecting second graders, gentrifying the East Quad of the playground by spitballing foreign kids, and even inducing the dreaded and torturous atomic wedgie, the unspoken fear of the entire elementary school community. These are the astonishing tales of the serious business of elementary school. I was wearing my kufi, my mother's father's kufi, with its beautiful full red and blue patterns. Kufi? Nigga, that shit's a goofy. That barb came during study hall, part of the slow nipping away before the inevitable big fight. The thing is, true believer, after-school specials for all the good they did, all the posturing about the world they were preparing us to inherit, or maybe simply just tolerate. They never told us what to do in the meantime. These are the astonishing tales of what to do in the meantime. My kufi flew off as I lunged at Paul, and the crowd of confused tweens around us hushed. Paul had 30 pounds on me, but I was Donald McDougal. I'd spent the Tuesday prior breaking my first wooden board in karate class, advancing to a yellow belt. I'd ridden rocket skateboards through the sky. I'd once read 17 Goosebumps books in one day. I was not to be fucked with. Paul wailed while I rained nightmares on his face with fists, nails, spittle, and slaps. Finally, I reached back to deliver a dramatic knockout blow. But as I did, Paul thrust one of his LA lights into the center of my chest and used those extra 30 pounds to knock me away. It worked, but only for a moment. When he advanced, my fist crashed into his mouth. Blood welled from his lip. Then a giant's hand swept under my torso, and I was jerked away from my enemy. It was over. These are the astonishing tales of obscenities and office chairs. Mr. McDougal, the principal began. Please, said my father. Malik is fine. Of course. May leak. Donald is a very special boy. No one is disputing that. His teachers are impressed with his scores, and he's a joy to have around. For them. That's probably why we've held out on doing anything about this issue until now. Issue? I'm sorry, sir. I don't know if I understand what you mean. My father's dreadlocks were tied back, and his horn-rimmed glasses refracted the sunlight. I was surrounded by giants. It's not wise to show weakness in the company of giants, lest they take the opportunity to crush you. Mr. Graydrake, our principal, wasn't a strict man. He was the kind of principal you could imagine once had dreams of being a cool English teacher who relished calls of, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." Sadly, he sat instead behind a giant oak desk, playing solitaire or castigating the parents of delinquents in trading. Yes, Murlock, the issue. It's only been 5 weeks since we last met in here. Jenny Jackson's locker still smells like dead fish. I laughed, but no one else did. For a moment, I considered reminding Mr. Graydrake that Jenny had called Kat a dyke for wearing boys' polo shirts, but instead I sulked. Yes, but in 3 weeks before that, I understand, Donald is a rambunctious kid. And lest we forget, the sandpaper salad incident? Regardless, as exceptional as Donald is, I don't think we can let this incident slide. What Mr. Graydrake kept avoiding was the fact that I hadn't started any of those things. I never started anything. I wasn't a spark yet. So what are you saying, Mr. Graydrake? My father clasped his hands together. I'm saying that I think we have no other choice but move on to expulsion. Expulsion. It was the life sentence for children. A word synonymous with a future of loitering on street corners and sipping from paper bags. My father's expression didn't change. Mr. Graydrake, I understand how you feel, but this boy, this young man, he hasn't had a lot of opportunities. This school, this expensive school, is one of the only chances a boy like Donald here has to make something of himself. He has friends now, and he's part of the chess team. I can promise you, Donald will be more disciplined in the future. But to take him out of this excellent school over a childish scuffle when he's finally doing so well seems a bit excessive, don't you think? Before Mr. Graydrake could respond, my father coughed, a heavy, rattling, hard-blood cough. Are you all right? Mr. Graydrake said, looking alarmed. My father raised a hand. He was a strong man. Please, Mr. Graydrake, don't expel my son. He leaned back and adjusted his blazer. Mr. Graydrake watched my father for a moment and then glanced back at me as if surprised I was still in the room. When he'd stared for too long, I smiled awkwardly and couldn't help but smile back. This is his last chance. 2 weeks suspension, and I swear if he causes any more trouble, anything, he's out for good. Do you understand? Yes, I promise you, Mr. Graydrake. You won't regret this. It's a slight warning. When we drove home, there were no words, no music to fill the silence. My father had set the radio to an empty AM station, connected only to static. The white noise was infuriating. What did you expect me to do? I finally burst. He made fun of my kufi. He's always riding me. Kid, you really don't want to get an attitude with me right now. I just meant you told me, Dad. You told me that I should never let anyone walk all over me. I didn't start anything. He made fun of my kufi, so I fought back. I always fight back. No one's telling you not to stand up for yourself, Donald. You just don't have to be a dumbass about it in front of in middle class. Who did that help? What do you think they see you as now? I seethed. I hadn't done anything wrong. It was just another shit day and another shit school. I tightened fists at my side. I had to make him see. The car jerked so sharply that my head tapped against the passenger side window. He didn't seem to care that I just hurled myself from the skateboard a few weeks before, at least not in the moment. The dust kept rising in a cloud even after the car had stopped, even after he'd slammed the door getting out, even after he snatched me out by the forearm. I was rattled and rage-filled, but only half as much as he was. My father was a strong man. You gonna buck at me? Boy, you better get your goddamn mind right. He inched closer to me. He swung backhand flatly against my chest. Thwup, thwup. The taps were all it took to make me suck my bottom lip tight to my teeth. You bad, ain't you? You want to buck at me? Do something. Thwup, thwup. You afraid now? Come on, Donald. Thwup, thwup. The light backhand hurt no more than if his hand had been made by a block of styrofoam. I cried, because unlike the lash of belt against bare butt, this was personal. There had been this unspoken agreement somewhere between his old crack pipe and the unsolved case of my missing Super Nintendo. After NA, after rehab, that I could trust him, that he would be astonishing. I keep trying to teach you, but you don't want to listen to nobody. What? You think they care if you cry? What? You think they care if you didn't start it? What? They care if you act like you know better. They care if they don't kill you first. Thank you. Well, we are, I guess, at Tintle. Wow, that went faster than I thought it would. I had like this whole origin story of me planned. It's going to be pretty dope. But yeah, I guess a question would be awesome. If you guys have any. Yeah, sure.
So I was just actually met with Terry earlier because I'm a recent graduate that was working on my senior writing project.
Awesome.
And he mentioned that this started as your project, so I just kind of want to hear about your journey from, writing this your senior year to getting published.
Awesome. Yeah. Doing the project itself was really helpful in meeting with everybody a lot of the times. Like that was probably the best thing I got from it, because to kind of see other people in the trenches with you and struggling, which I think is important, and also you can find outside of the university situation, because you just want to try to find writing groups and different people to challenge you, critique your work. But this was a definite place that helped push me when I saw other people still kind of striving. I finished the first version, and that was my assignment, which I aced. I went from there and kept it going, and it just never seemed to stop coming out until I realized, okay, this needs to stop. I'm at 800 pages, which you'll notice it's been far trimmed. But yeah, no, that experience was really important to, I think, getting to where I am with the book being published.
Just to follow up, how has it changed over that time period from your first ideas of what the Black Spark would be? And I mean, you had that sudden insight, let's try this.
Yeah.
And then how did it morph? And did it surprise you at certain points where it became a different story than you were intending? Or?
Very much so. When it came to that, specifically that part about did it become a different story. But working on it from then to now, I kind of expanded what I wanted to do with it, what I wanted to discuss. And it became so much more about kind of questioning either ideals that I thought were very toxic, and also became more about me questioning my own ideals that I may previously have had regarding different aspects of my identity within my community. And yeah, it kind of just kept growing in that respect more than I was expecting it to, as far as this focus on what is it that defines Black for those who put it on you. For instance, his name was starting out as the Astonishing Spark, but they put that Black on his name, which is why there's a strike through on the book, because it's not necessarily that he is at all ashamed or questioning his identity as a Black man, but more so that the Black wasn't claimed by him, but that version of Black carries so many stereotypes, so many ideas that aren't true and are just kind of a catch-all for coding slams against an entire people.
A quick follow-up to that. How should I say the name of your book, the title? Because it's Black cross through. So should I be like the Black Spark or something? But seriously, how do you prefer to say the title of the book?
Well, I honestly, I like either way, because I don't necessarily think that, because when you're going in, people don't know that about the book. So it's weird. I've noticed some people say the Astonishing Spark more after they've read to a certain point, and then others will say the Astonishing Black Spark, regardless of if they finished it or not sometimes. But it never feels like they're discrediting that aspect of the plot. So I'm fine with either to answer that. Yeah.
Was the protagonist's name always Donald? And that must have taken a weird turn.
A little bit.
Over the years. So, I mean, just wondering what you think about that, or was that always his name?
Yeah, well, Donald, so yes and no. So, for one, not gonna lie, huge Childish Gambino fan, and I had a little bit of a reason I went with Donald. But it always was going to start with D, and the last name was always going to start with MC, because Static Spark, wow, I wish, Static Shock, he was like one of Milestone Comics, like flagship characters, and he had like electricity powers. He was kind of a nerd. And in the comic, more specifically from the cartoon, they would always kind of examine issues that weren't normally talked about at the time in the 90s of just those types of like experiences. So I wanted to honor Dwayne McDuffie, who was one of the founders and creative leads of Milestone, and refer to Donald as Donald McDougal as kind of a But I didn't want to name him Dwayne because Donald isn't as woke, quote unquote, as fun as that word is to use, as the original guy who said, hey, let's write real experiences of marginalized groups in a comic book format.
Can you talk about, too, because you were saying, explain to us about your research of superheroes, right? And how black superheroes usually have a specific power, right?
Yeah.
But also what you found out about electricity.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so can you explain that?
Yeah, I guess there's a few ways just to answer that. For one, there's the idea that I came across, unfortunately, not in this particular volume, but it might, anyway, that I felt, because I was trying to find like a realist reason for him to have electricity powers in our world, and why so many black characters have electricity powers. It's a common running thing. And I actually came across that melanin is a superconductor of electricity, but that's never really used. But I was like, oh man, that is hilarious. I'm like, perfect. But yeah, so that might pop up later. But also, I felt that to some degree, it's the idea of this, you can't, why reinvent the wheel, but that only tends to apply to your marginalized characters. It doesn't really apply to other superheroes, where it's more open in the range of power sets. It's like, oh, Black Lightning worked for DC, this character will work for Marvel, et cetera, because it's like regurgitating, because they feel like that experience is easily regurgitated, not that these are individuals you're speaking of, but just a group, this monolithic society that meets on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and, decides what's the best fried chicken joint or something. But also the idea of the violent nature of the power too, to some degree. It's always like an active power I've seen. I don't see many black healer characters, unless that's a point to bring up with their power set. And yeah, just that tangible power that you can be afraid of. Like a lightning storm. Well, with the time, I guess I'll take one. I should. Oh, okay.
Sorry, I
no.
love superheroes, and I've always wanted to write a superhero book. I'm never sure how to do it, but I just had kind of a fun question. If this was a movie, who would you want to play the villain?
Let me think about it.
Thought about it.
Unfortunately, he's a little too old now, but beyond him, I haven't really thought about it, to be honest. So I was just like, all right, this whole book is just going to be my way to find the new Childish Gambino. but no, aside from that, I haven't really thought too much about who I would play. Back in the day before he became super famous, I was like, oh yeah, I can see the scene, Donald Glover's Donald McDougal, Michael B. Jordan's Paul Hughes, just sitting there talking about things. Yeah, so definitely have those moments of if this were a movie. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming. I'll be hanging out for a minute, but since we're after 5, I don't want to hold anybody up. But yeah, thank you so much.